Thank you for joining us on the Southwest Florida Business Podcast. I'm joined by Melanie from She'll Rise. I love this interview. It was great because we really got to dive into the limiting beliefs that most of us have. We go on her journey from how this all came about and how she's taking her experiences and helping other women, I won't say get over, but deal with the anxiety that they have, realize the self-limiting beliefs that they have, and go from really a gray life to a life in color. So please stay tuned for this episode. I learned a ton, and I hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Southwest Florida Podcast. If you're a business in Southwest Florida and you want to use a podcast to grow your business, scan the QR code on your screen or visit the link in the show notes at www.swflpodcast.com. Enjoy the show. Melanie, you ready?
I think I am.
All right, let's do it. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to dive into a couple different things, but I want to cover really what your business is, if you're good to share it, the story of how this came to be. Yeah. It was very interesting to listen to that podcast that you did, and I got to learn more via that. So I would like to really share that with the listeners because it changed my mind about a lot of stuff, just in terms of anxiety and the way that you approach these different things that afflict most people. So if we could start with that, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Okay, I'm game. I love that you took the time to listen to it, first of all, and that it had an impact on you, because I think when it comes to these types of platforms, it's really an opportunity for just genuine, raw, authentic conversation, and out of that, real truth and honesty is there, and that's the stuff that people can tap into. It resonates with them, and then something will stick. So that's exciting for me to hear, because that's what I want. I want people to understand what anxiety is about. And, you know, when you really understand it, you get to harness it as a power. It's not a handicap or an obstacle or a challenge or debilitating, all those things that we typically think that it is. So that's exciting for me. So
yeah. Well, and one thing that you mentioned in that I've always thought of it this way, but I didn't kind of go that next step to what to do with this. But I always viewed anxiety, fear, all of these, quote, negative emotions kind of as your body or your mind's way of telling you that something isn't right. It's like the same as you get a stuffy nose. It's your body telling you that you actually have something wrong. It doesn't mean ignore it or mask it. And it doesn't have to be an inherently bad thing. You can use it as a sign.
Exactly.
And then your follow-up with that of what to actually do, was very insightful.
Good. So giving you some background. So I'm currently writing my book, which is incredibly scary for me because it's now taking the actual story, all the parts, and putting it in black and white. So, you know, this conversation is exciting because there's stuff that I can infuse that I haven't really talked about. So when you think about anxiety, there is so much more conversation around it now. People are understanding the severity of it, signs and symptoms that we typically don't really understand and connect to anxiety. So when I was growing up, I struggled with reading. And I was quickly labeled as a below average reader.
Sure.
And when it comes to the cognitive behavior therapy, that was a seed that was planted for me. And what it did was it shaped how I looked at myself, my self-perception. So everything that had to do with reading was a challenge for me. And there was a lot of shame and embarrassment associated with being labeled a below average reader. And the teacher that would come to get me out of class, I absolutely loved her. I felt safe with her. You know, she was substantial in size, but just so gentle and kind. But when she would come into the classroom, she would say, "Melanie, I'm here to take you to chapter 1 reading because you're not able to read with your classmates." And initially, okay, not a big deal. But then the classmates started to understand that for me, there was something broken. I couldn't keep up. I couldn't do it like them. And it became something that really shaped how I looked at myself. Fast forward, if I had ascribed to that label and allow it to define who I was and actually prohibit me from tapping into the gifts that God had given to me, I wouldn't be writing a book.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important to recognize these things that shape us in our younger years, childhood experiences, unresolved hurt, past traumas, unprocessed trauma, all of those things. They do shape us, but we have the ability to take captive our thoughts and reshape how they impact us. And the reason I'm bringing that up is two reasons. One, that was when anxiety was first triggered in me, but I had no idea what it was. I had no idea how to articulate what was going on within me. There were no words that I could find to ask for help. So I just silenced it, and it became part of who I was. And there are tons of other things that happened that compounded all of those things.
Sure.
But anxiety skyrocketed for me. And for far too long, it was in absolute control. But I didn't know how to say, this is what I'm feeling. Help me understand this. How do I better manage this? I didn't have the emotional maturity. I didn't have the personal maturity. And with the fear and shame attached to that one occasion, it was like, well, I don't want to share this because I'm already viewed this way as it is. I don't want to add to that.
But then you end up applying it to every future situation. So that's
Absolutely.
how it is that kind of how it compounded for you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And the thing to understand with anxiety is every single person has anxiety, and there's healthy anxiety. And like you said, there can be situations that you're in that you kind of get revved up, emotionally charged, and that's anxiety saying like, hey, pay attention. There's a possible risk here. You could get hurt. We need to think this through. People have health anxiety, social anxiety. There's a lot of different forms of anxiety.
Sure.
And recognizing that it exists is first and foremost critically important. Because if it's something that you can manage effectively by simply being aware that it's there and holding space for it, fantastic. But it's when it becomes debilitating, where it is in control, every thought, every action is dictated by the anxiety within you, then it's something that we need to actually go a little further, because now it's escalated and it needs attention. So when I think back to how She'll Rise was born, for a lot of years, I was always teaching and coaching in some capacity.
Okay.
I knew that was my calling. Dance teacher, volleyball coach, horse trainer, all of those things allowed me to carry out the purpose. But because I had never dealt with the anxiety and the depression and then what was later diagnosed as PTSD, all of those things were temporary for me. I wasn't actually fulfilled. I always felt a void. I always felt fear and shame. There were things that I just couldn't find the words to articulate.
So in this case, you were doing all the things that you should be doing, quote, should be doing,
Right.
of, taking charge, doing the things that you enjoy, teaching others, doing the standard kind of things that fulfill, I guess, most people that don't have this underlying issue, and you're still finding that you had this void there. So,
Yes.
Did that even add like more frustration or confusion to it?
Because if you think about when you're doing something that you're passionate about and you feel like you're walking in alignment, you are carrying out your purpose, but yet you still feel empty, it's extremely frustrating. So then there's anger and resentment, and then there's fear and shame associated with that, and intense guilt, and it just continues to stir up all the unresolved things that had not been dealt with. So, eventually I got to a place where I was doing business and executive coaching. I was working with massive corporations, hospitals, colleges, private practices, individuals, small businesses, large businesses, and doing all these spectacular things with them and for them.
Sure.
But because of my own baggage, the crap that I had been dragging with me year upon year, I would get home and feel like a hypocrite. Because here I am asking these business people to do these things to change their business, to grow their business, to change the culture, the dynamic, all of these things with their employees and potential customers and so forth. And then I'm coming home and I'm not applying any of it to my own life because I didn't feel worthy. And that's what anxiety told me. You can do these things for other people, but don't think that you're worth applying what you're teaching. Oh, and by the way, if anybody finds this out, you're nothing.
You're a fraud. You're a sham.
It gives me goosebumps when I think about that.
But yeah. It's the imposter syndrome. And
Absolutely.
Then plus you take the standard imposter syndrome and just push the throttle all the way.
Full throttle.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Full tank of gas, full throttle. I mean, dual engines, all in. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I kept pressing on because at that time, and I talk about this in my book, I had a poorly designed metric system for measuring my worth, my value. And it was associated with and dependent upon people pleasing. Doing for other people, showing up and serving and giving and doing all of these things for other people. And that's how I measured my worth and my value. And if I couldn't, then I was worth nothing. And when you create that kind of real estate in your mind, anxiety is like, let's go. Full throttle, dual engine, let's go.
Oh, yeah. And it lets all those other negative forces. There's a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. He calls it resistance. But any of those underlying things, let this stopping force come in, take over, set up a beachhead, and now everything to even get back to regular is a total fight.
Absolutely.
This piece of self-talk and self-worth, and for me, a lot of it came down to the way I was talking to myself. Until I realized that, I ended up limiting myself a lot in terms of what I thought I could do, what I was capable of, and then it ended up getting in the way of a lot of my life goals. So I'd say to myself, well, I want to do X with music, but I'm not that good. I'm not that cool. Yeah. I don't have a cool drug addiction to have whatever thing that Led Zeppelin had. And you come up with all these things, but then you kind of come back to, I kind of came back to well, you're not able to do it because, you're a fraud, you're a piece of shit, you messed something up, I can't believe you did this. And when I heard somebody talking about what kept the top tennis players in the world from being able to get from 10th place to first place was their self-talk. Yeah. And it's these guys literally have done everything right except this core piece.
Right.
And for me, finding that self-compassion was a big breakthrough for me. And I never like to talk about it because I'm from Long Island, and that's wussy stuff,
Yeah.
So just, I don't know. That's very interesting. So sorry to derail you from how this started.
That's okay.
Can we jump back into how your business started?
But wait, because you've created this segue now.
Okay.
So, the greatest battle that you will ever encounter is the one that takes place between the 6 inches between your ears.
Yep.
It's all about the mind. And you're talking about that toxic talk, and that is shaped by childhood experiences, life experience, and so forth. You don't just wake up and come into this world and think you're not worthy, you're not good enough. It's learned behaviors. You are conditioned that way. So that battle will limit you. And it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, when it comes to anxiety, depression, lies, limiting beliefs, all of that, there's no stopping. They don't say, oh, you're 6 foot tall, I'm not going to touch you. Or, oh, you have perfect teeth, I'm not going there. Or, oh, you have a family that's fully intact, I'm not going there. It doesn't care. It doesn't discriminate.
Yeah.
It doesn't care about any of those things. You just create the real estate in your mind for it to take root, and then you nourish it. And that's exactly what you were doing.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have to be able to say, you know what? This shit, and I love that you use the word shit. I rarely cuss, but shit is actually an acronym in my program. It stands for Stuff Hindering Individual Transformation. And a lot of times what we need to do is we need to look at that 6 inches between our ears, really get honest and aware of the thoughts running through our mind, use that shit list to start to capture what is it that's holding me hostage. I'm in bondage. I'm not capable of breaking free and doing the things I'm called to do because of, I don't think I have these things. I've been told this. I've been taught this. I've been modeled that. And all of that may be true. But at some point, you have to take ownership of it. You are 100% responsible for what happens now and what happens next. And when you get to the point where you're taking ownership and accepting, now you create the space for that ugly work to happen, and then you start to move through it. And I'm sure you've heard, in the other podcasts, like, it doesn't matter what you're doing to cope, and I use my air quotes for cope, because people don't understand the unhealthy coping mechanisms that they gravitate towards without even thinking about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I do it all the time with like you do martial arts, I do jiu-jitsu, and some of the stuff that I would come up with is, all right, well, a couple hours before, I'll eat something that's going to make me feel horrible before I go, and then I don't really feel like going, so then you don't go, and then it's 2 weeks later, I haven't gone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I did that to myself, and like realizing those things, how they mess you up, it's so sneaky too.
That's the thing. It is absolutely a sneak attack. And before you know it, like you said, it's 2 weeks, 3 months, 5 years. You're like, what has happened? What has happened? And then you've got the rush of guilt because you didn't do what you should have done and all those things. So, and that's the
time.
Yeah, and that's the cognitive distortions. Like, let's just take all this captive. Let's look at the thoughts that you were having and what are the emotions that are being generated, the physiological reactions and the behaviors.
Yeah.
Let's look at that so we can go to work on it, because it all starts with one thought, and you are simply one decision away from changing the trajectory of your life. Not 30 decisions, not 5-year goals, one decision. You only have to make the next best decision and then keep doing that time and time again, and then it compounds. And before you know it, you're living a very different life. You're walking in alignment. You are fulfilling your purpose. You feel fulfilled. The void that I had was gone because now all of a sudden I've shut down the lies, the limiting beliefs, the toxic talk. I know what I deserve to hear. I know what God says about me. That is truth. That defines me. All the other stuff, it can come, but I'm going to send it away because it has no value. It has no value. And that kind of leads me back into like where it came from.
Yeah.
So all of these things are going on within me. And I eventually got to a point where I had hit a rock bottom. Like, I'm a hypocrite. I'm a fraud. I can't continue. Something's got to change. And, there's a lot of intricate detail between what I just dropped and where I am today. But the important thing is, I came to a rock bottom where I had to make a decision. And the decision was, if I continue on the path that I am, I won't be here. I simply will not be here. Yeah. And at this moment, I'm in the emergency room from an overdose of trying to take my own life because that felt like the best solution for everybody. But I chose to respond to God reaching down and saying, you know what, not yet. Nice try, but not yet. Yeah. And I made the decision at that point to choose to show up, dig in, and do the hard work in my life to rise up strong every single day, and then turning around and helping other women is my focus. But like on my Clubhouse, it's all people, bringing other people forward because there's power in your story. So even just thinking about, you possibly wanting to be a musician and not doing it because of all of the crap in your head. And now here you are on video and microphone and having conversations, that thought was temporary. You had to break through that thought pattern to change the behaviors to get here to do this because it takes the same kind of courage.
Yeah.
So that's when She'll Rise was born. It took a very different turn for me. I was no longer focused on business people, businesses. I was focused on the human. And again, for me, it's women. I love all things women. And it was about helping them see, like, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't define you. It doesn't say that you're worthy or you're not worthy. It doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home mom or a career woman or a business owner or any of those things. Like, I want you as a human to be whole and healed. And whatever you desire, whatever is in alignment and you are called to do, you're going to do it boldly and courageously because you believe in what you're capable of. And to get to that point, there's a lot of ugly stuff that we have got to get real about. We got to reveal it so that we can heal it. And then we can start to harness the power of anxiety, depression, PTSD, leverage it to keep us moving forward. So that's how She'll Rise, it was an evolution. And that's how She'll Rise came to be in existence. So,
well, it's interesting the way that you phrase that too, because it doesn't matter what your current role is, right?
Yeah.
It almost comes back to your initial thing of, well, you can't read, but now you're writing a book.
Right.
So it really is kind of in line with that. I think everybody has that foundation to some extent.
Yeah.
It depends where your bottom is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but you may be here and you're sitting with these labels and you have all these thoughts that you already have cemented.
Yeah.
So on this, right? When you're in, let's talk about the trajectory upwards.
Okay.
So with this, when you were in that spot, where did you start to make this transformation? How did you start seeing the path out of this? And then I kind of want to tie into how you were able to understand that this is something that can work for other people as well.
Yeah. Unfortunately, but then also fortunately, because of the actions that I took, it put me in a position where I didn't have any say. I was forced into a behavioral institution. I had to go to therapy, all of these things.
Sure.
So I was forced. But that forcing was exactly what I need to get my head clear to begin the work. And, that was 2015. Here we are almost 7 years later. November will be 7 years.
Yeah.
And it's still an ongoing process for me.
Sure.
I never like when people say healed or recovered or I've overcome.
Because it never ends.
No, and you become comfortable and complacent. And then it's so easy for one decision to cause a relapse, whether it's the thought process or back into drug addiction or, whatever unhealthy coping mechanism, those maladaptive behaviors, those avoidance coping mechanisms that develop as a result. One decision can send you back. So it's an ongoing process. And, I did the things that I had to do because it was required. But even in those situations, I remember my pastor called to check on me. How is Melanie doing? And they said, she's doing great. She's helping all of the other patients. You wouldn't believe what she's able to get them to do, the work that they're complete. My question was, how is Melanie doing? And they're like, I don't understand the question. Mm-hmm. And that, Chris, was like an ongoing theme. Like nobody ever saw me and what my needs were. And part of that is my fault because I never knew what they were and I never spoke up.
Well, and if you were doing that kind of work before, this is just a guess, but maybe the default setting was, I'm not actually important. I need to make sure everybody else at this facility is taken care of, and I'm going to raise them up. And then it's like, how is she doing? And even you probably didn't even think of, hey, how am I doing?
Yeah, that's spot on.
Okay.
I mean, that is so incredibly accurate. So, those thought behaviors, those behavior patterns continued right into a behavior institution where I was forced to be there to do work on myself. I was able to still do exactly what I had always done, and that was please others, serve others, do for others. And when I got out of there, that's when the real work actually began because all of that was removed. There's no people for you to help now. It's just you and you.
And there's nobody forcing you to.
Now I had a choice. Mm-hmm. Now I had a choice. And that's why I say, every day since that November 15th failed suicide attempt, I've been choosing to show up, dig in, and do the hard work.
Yeah.
There's some days that I don't want to. But, the 3 power words I use in my program are diligent, obedient, and consistent. When you don't want to, you do it anyway. When it's too hard, you do it anyway. When you want to throw in the towel, you do it anyway. Because you're worth the hard work and you can do hard things, regardless of what you've been convinced of, what you've been told, what's been spoken over you, what's been spoken to you. You can do hard things. You just have to get to the point where there's just a seed of faith in what he can do and what you can do as a result. And that's when the change will happen. So going to therapy and all those things, it was helpful, and this is also where the trajectory of She'll Rise changed because therapy wasn't enough for me. Going and sitting on a couch and talking week in and week out was not enough for me. I needed action. I needed tangible things that I could implement when I left to come back and report progress. So I could see breakthroughs. I could see change. I could see progress and transformation. I could see growth, but it wasn't happening. So my brain, from all the years of doing what I was doing, was like, okay, I'm not getting it. Now I know I'm worthy. I have a need that's not being met. I'm going to figure it out. And that's how my process was created. It's called the Rise Up process. That's how it was created. So everything that I needed to transform that would complement me being in therapy was part of my program. I saw what it was doing in my own life. Others started to see. So then I started to share it. And, a lot of people go to therapy and it's exactly what they need. That's fantastic. A lot of people go to therapy and they need therapy and medication. That's okay. If it works, continue. But some people are on medication, they're in intensive therapy, and there's no change. That's my ideal client. That is the woman who is fed up, they're exhausted, they're tired of doing all of these things, feeling crappy, and not seeing any results.
Yeah.
The Rise Up program is what changes the dynamic. And it's the one decision to say, you know what, I am worthy of the investment. I'm going to show up and do this work. And as a result, they see the results. It ignites sustainable change in their life. All of a sudden, anxiety, depression, PTSD, they're in control of it. They're managing it effectively. The lies, limiting beliefs, they can recognize it for what it is. They can take it captive. They can reframe it. They can release it. They know what to do with it. If it has value, it takes root and they think about it. There's emotions, behaviors that will result because they took it and allowed it to take root. But they know the ones that should take root and the ones that should not take root. And that's being empowered.
Yeah.
That's stepping into who you're called to be and walking in alignment. And it's a game changer.
Yeah. Well, and plus having the experience of having gone through that and dealing with all the same, literally the same exact things. Yeah. Because like you said, everything is about what takes place in your head, the battle that takes place. The outside is going to look completely different. Somebody literally could have the exact opposite life as you, but the same exact things going on in their head. So knowing this process and knowing what, in this case, because you focus with women, knowing what these women are going through, where do you start in this process? Like, how do you make that connection? How do you show them, okay, I've been through this. I know where you're at. Here's where we need to go. And here's why you need to come along with me. Like, where does that start?
Yeah. Part of what made me feel like a fraud and a hypocrite in the past was hiding all those parts. Now I don't. Okay. So you always get the same version of me. I'm raw, genuine, honest, authentic, real. The women will laugh like there's snot running, I'm wiping it. They're like, you really just wipe my snot? And I'm like, that's who I am.
Like, I love all the parts of you and I want you to love all the parts of you too. And sometimes we need a hand. And if it's wiping the snot because you're so emotional, I'm your girl. So showing up and sharing my story. But what we have to be cautious of is a lot of times when people are sharing their story, it's always from a place of woundedness. Mm-hmm. When it's coming from woundedness, it keeps you trapped in the cycle, the thought pattern, the behavior pattern, the physiological reactions. Your body keeps score. When you do the work to heal, now you share your story from a place of healing, and it's about restoration, renewal, transformation, healing, overcoming all of those things. So as I'm sharing, it's not about, oh, ho-hum, poor me. It's about, hey, I was there. This is what I experienced. I understand exactly what you're feeling. This is what I did. This is where I am. But even more importantly than that, I share my story, but then I have the testimonies of countless women to then say, they trusted me. This is where they were. This is what they did. And I was there with them every step of the way. And now this is how they're living. Yeah. Because my story is powerful. But when I can start to share the stories of all these other women, now women are like, one, she gets it. Two, she is so honest. And there are women who have trusted her and they're seeing the same results. Let me give it a shot.
Yeah.
Let me give it a shot. And a lot of times these women are this is it. I had one recent client who came to the retreat that we had and she was like crying and sharing. And she said to these women, like, Melanie was it. She said, I had nothing left. I'd been through everything, every medication, this was it. Like, I literally was not going to be here any longer. And
this was the Hail Mary.
This is it. Like, God said, here's the opportunity, embrace it. I gave it all I had. Melanie is exactly who she says she is. She will call you on your bullshit. She will come find you. Like, you can't hide because she knows that you can do this work. And I'm here, and her reference I love, she lived in kind of a gray life, and now she lives in color.
Okay.
So, there's so much that took place, and we've been working together for 3 years now. So that's why it's a journey. It's not a destination, but
it's interesting you say go from gray life to a life in color, because when you're explaining some of this, especially coming from a position of woundedness versus healing, I think this kind of stuff ends up emanating in all aspects of your life in ways that you don't know it. So I'll give an example for this podcast. I mean, this podcast is a service, and this is like the 8th version of me trying to figure out what I'm selling and what this business is. And that whole time, a lot of it was coming from a place of fear.
Yeah.
And so when you go and talk to people about this, rather than saying, hey, here's what it is, I do X, Y, Z, here's how I help, what can I help you with? And then boom, we'll do this, and this is what you'll get from it. It was coming from a place of, do you think that maybe you want this? And is this okay with you? And I think that ends up pushing people away as well. And you don't even realize that you're doing more, I say damage to yourself, but in a way you're doing more damage to yourself. But you think it's safer because it's kind of what you know, and it's hard to break out of that. I think for me, it was understanding what those thoughts were, those emotions, everything like that. Like journaling helps me with that. Yeah. But knowing that, having that out on the table, then you could start to see your own shit, the SHIT. But yeah, so that's just what that got me thinking about.
Yeah. And that's all self-sabotaging. Like you have this thing and you want to get it to people because it's valuable, but you don't quite believe in it. So you kind of put it out there, but you're putting it out there with your own disbelief. So you're doing a disservice. You are doing more damage. You're self-sabotaging the opportunity to bring value that can change the life of someone else. If you don't believe in it, they're not going to believe in it either.
Yeah.
And the not believing is from a place of woundedness, where healing is like, you know what, I'm struggling to see the value of this, but I know it's there. Here's why. And you share that version. You're like, oh, he's actually recognizing he has something good, but he's struggling to communicate it. And I struggle to communicate. I resonate with that.
Yeah.
Like I need to sit down with Chris. So that's where you get to the emotions, and you break down the overthinking and the ego and all that kind of stuff. And you just get to the emotion where they're like, you know what? Yeah. Like I can relate to struggling.
Yeah.
What is it you're selling? I want to hear more. And when it comes to being in business, it's incredibly powerful to just be real.
Yeah.
Because businesses are developed because there's a problem somewhere and a solution was found. And this solution, like my process, is too good to keep to myself. I'm not going to hoard it. And then it becomes something that delivers value. And it's immeasurable, the value that my program delivers, because it's life-changing. Marriages have been restored. I mean, people who thought they could never have children because now they're taking care of their mind, their body, they're eating well, they're moving, they're in a healthy marriage. All of a sudden they do get pregnant. And, just all these beautiful things. And it's a beautiful byproduct of being willing to do the hard work. You're fearing this. Why? What is the fear attached to? You're not fearful of this coming to fruition. There's something that's deeply rooted in you that the fear is attached to, and now you're just projecting it on everything else. And it has nothing to do with this, but it's going to sabotage and hold you back if you allow it.
Yeah.
And you chose not to allow it.
Well, and it's interesting that you say value in this case. And once I kind of started seeing the value that this brought, that was another piece that allowed me to change my mind. So it was almost a chicken and the egg type situation.
Sure.
But just from a business perspective of starting this out, where was there a moment where you started saying, oh, this is valuable for others? Like I can actually turn this into a business. Because before, this is probably just naive because I've never started a business, but you think I do this and somebody gives me money. And then you realize when you go, hey, can you give me money? And everybody says no. And you go, all right, I actually have to do something valuable. So where was there a moment where you said, oh, I am actually delivering valuable. This is a business. Like, do you have a moment or a time?
Well, for me, because of the sensitivity of what I was doing was so important. Like, it was critical to get into the hands of other women. The money was never a driving force for me.
Okay.
You know, so the value was not, and this is an investment. There's a return on the investment. For me, being able to bring it to women to experience the change, they wanted to invest in it. So the money didn't drive me. It was the genuine desire to get what worked in my life
in the hands of other women, because I knew it could work for them too. And that desire, that was my deep why. I didn't want women to suffer as long as I did. I didn't want women to have to hit a rock bottom. I didn't want women to sabotage their marriages and show up poorly as a mom and all of these things.
Yeah.
I wanted them to be able to do it differently. And I had the answers on how to do it differently. So I knew, and I have a business mindset. I mean,
Sure.
I was 15 years old and started a dance school. Like, I always knew that I would not work for somebody else.
Okay.
I knew I would be a business owner in some form of fashion. And God has used everything along the way to shape me for exactly what I'm doing now.
So you already had this. You had this foundation that was rooted in this. So for you already had that experience. You've been doing a bunch of different stuff for a while.
Yeah.
On this venture, it was value is the foundation.
Absolutely.
And then the business is whatever else can be built up from that.
Yeah.
Consulting, coaching, doing these, I'll call them advanced or in-depth therapy, writing a book, possibly doing a podcast, hugging a cactus.
Yeah, you remember that.
I remember.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's what I'm learning now from
Yeah.
going through this process is you have to start with the value.
Absolutely.
Which I got legitimately 100% wrong when I started all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, no, that's cool to hear the flip side of that.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, when the value is there, you have to let go of that need for perfection. You'll never have all the answers.
Yep.
Anxiety takes root and it's like, oh, you need to know all the things before you can take one step. Oh, and don't take that step because it's not going to work. You're going to fail. You're going to end up being exactly who you've been told you are all these years. So you've got to be willing to take messy action. And I say, I'll take messy action all day long over someone sitting there being inactive because they're waiting for all the answers, all the worst case scenarios, all the possible outcomes, all the what ifs and the should be's and all those things. It will keep you stuck. And people, men and women, need to understand that they were created for a purpose. And there's already value within you. And it's just a matter of you recognizing what that value is and believing in it. And when you have that humble confidence, people are drawn to you, and you don't have to sell, because early on when I came to Florida, I had a girl question me, like, what is it that you do? And, I'm elaborating on all the things. And she's like, so you're selling coaching? And I'm like, no, I don't have to sell anything. And it's not about being prideful. It's about being honest. When I talk to women, they're drawn to the hope, the honesty, seeing that where I was is where they currently are and where I am is possible for them, and I can help them bridge the gap to get there. So I always stay humble because, I would love to be in a world where there are no clients for me. That would be ideal. But the truth of it is, there's always going to be clients because there's always people hurting. There's always trauma and, traumatic events that just shape who we are, that we need help navigating. And, so when you take the focus away from the selling and you focus on relationships, getting to understand the human being and the emotion and whether or not their need is something that you can meet, and then be willing to say, you know what, you're not ready for this, or I understand your need and it would be more beneficial for you to do X, Y, and Z. I would love to help you and take your money. Don't get me wrong, as every business owner would. But that's not what I value in my business. It's not what I stand for. And I'm not going to compromise the integrity of who I am and what my practice represents for the sake of money coming in.
Yeah, quick buck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's so important. So important.
I know we're talking about not selling But in this case, where can people actually, like, how do people go in and learn more about what you do, what your approach is, how they can at least contact you to potentially work with you? I mean, how can people do that?
Yeah, well, my favorite place to hang out is Instagram.
You got some good stuff on there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And if you go way back, like, you'll see the evolution of that too. And like I said, it's a journey. You know, it's ever changing, and I'm always learning and studying, and
there are new things that come into my process as a result, because I don't want it to ever become stagnant either. So, with the Instagram, I'm always posting content that is relatable, always dropping just small tidbits of actionable items that are doable, regardless of whether or not you're working with me, another therapist, not doing anything at all at this point. Like, they're doable actions that you can implement. So Instagram is my favorite place.
Okay.
Reels, IG Lives, in my stories, all of those things. Also on Clubhouse, also on LinkedIn, which sometimes I forget I even have that, but it's there. Of course, email, text messaging, all of those things. Facebook I hang out on now and then too, but Instagram is the best place. And I'm super responsive. Now I have boundaries in place. Like, my phone gets silenced at 8:00. Of course, now I'm silencing it at 6, but I respond quickly, because if there is a need and I can meet it, I want to make sure that they know that I see them, I know them, I hear them, and I'm absolutely here for them every step of the way.
That's awesome. Yeah. And do you have a name for the book yet?
I don't. And it's funny, like, that's an evolution too, right? So originally, November 2016 was when I wrote the outline. I'm like, okay, God, I got it. I'm going to write the book. Like, stop harassing me. Go find another sheep. Like, come on. And at that point, it was Relentless Pursuit or Beautifully Broken. And both of those are suitable. But now, 7 years later, I am so much further in my own journey. And the women that I've worked with now, like, there is just so much more that would not have been possible at that time had I written. Now there's no option. Like, it's out there. I'm writing. I've signed a contract. Like, all of this is in forward motion. Yeah. And even still, like, there's, a possible title that'll come up. And as I'm writing, I'm like, yeah, that no longer fits. So the book is evolving and coming to fruition. And at some point, the title will be clear. But at this point, what I thought no longer applies. What felt right because of something that I had written, now because I've written more, is like, still not good enough. Like, it doesn't capture fully what this book is about. So yeah, so it's still coming.
That's
it's
awesome.
Still coming.
So do you have a deadline date that you have to meet?
Yes. So when I started talking earlier, and I said there's so much between this gap of my story, and then I started to drop the November date. So November 15, 2015 was my failed suicide attempt. So November 15th, 2022 will be when my book is released. I've already secured the space. It's going to be at the Wine Room in downtown Dover. Already started putting it out. I have people saving the date. So I'm creating all of these different elements of accountability and uncomfortable hugging the cactus type scenarios to keep me moving forward, because once I make a promise, I fulfill it. And now women are anticipating the book. They're expecting the book. They're eager to get the book in their hands. And I certainly, Lord willing, will not show up on November 15th and not have this book. So November 15th, 2022, it will be released, and we're going to have a launch party. And yeah, still very scary for it to be held in the hands of people. But at the same time, it's like, I think that's going to be so symbolic of how far I've come, that at this point, you holding it in your hands, the fear that was associated with that no longer exists, because I know what I've been through. I know what has happened in my life. I know what I'm capable of doing as a result of everything that I've endured, what I've overcome, my book knowledge, my college certifications, all those things, my life experience. And if this book is not for you, that's okay. But there are women out there that need exactly what this book is going to offer, and that's who I'm writing for.
And I bet once you have that book in your hands, the final one, you're probably not even going to read through. You just leaf through it. Then you just put it on the shelf and basically be like, that chapter of my life is is done. I'm going to take this and move forward from here. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it's probably it'll be like a huge weight lifted off.
For sure. I
So-
can kind of feel like a floating feeling. You know what I mean? Like, I did it. I did it. So
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, Melanie, thank you for coming and doing this. I appreciate it. Is there
Absolutely.
anything else that you want to tell the audience? Any
I
last pieces?
really would like to celebrate a couple of things that you dropped, talking about you having to address your fears, your limiting beliefs, using journaling. On my Clubhouse room, I have a club on Clubhouse, Rising Up Empowered, and there are 2 men that join me every week as co-mods, and that's incredibly powerful because, like I said, mental illness does not discriminate, and there are so many men out there suffering, and because it's viewed as weak, they don't speak up. So even you just being willing to say, like, I had these fears, these limiting beliefs, like I use journaling, that is so significant and empowering for another man to hear because they can overcome it too, So I just want to really celebrate those couple things that you dropped. I wanted to highlight and bring attention to it because my focus is women. I do work with men when it's a married couple. I do have a program for that, but my primary focus is women. But I get asked all the time, is there going to be a hill rise? Because there are men that need this too. And, women who are in relationships, they're not married and, they're like, the hill rise is really working, but I feel like there needs to be a hill rise too. And I'm like, I don't know.
I need to get this book done first.
I know. And I have women asking like, okay, so there's another book on the way. I could feel it. I'm like, let me get this one done. Hold up. Just let me get this one done. So that's what I would like to kind of leave the listeners with. Like, if you're a woman, I'm here to help you. There are so many opportunities out there to grow and evolve and get unstuck, but men too. There's the right people out there for you too. So don't allow that lie within you that says, hey, if I speak up, if I have a need, I'm weak. Shut it down, because it is a lie that's going to keep you stuck and you miss out on living the life that was designed for you. So regardless, ask for help, invite it in, and then take the messy action to apply the knowledge that you're gaining.
Cool.
yeah,
Thanks for doing this. This was great.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you, everybody. This episode is brought to you by Southwest Florida Podcast. If you're a business in Southwest Florida and you want to use a podcast to grow your business, scan the QR code on your screen or visit the link in the show notes at www.swflpodcast.com.